Just trying to see if this works. Oh, it did. Look, you're live.
Oh, good. We're live.
Wow, we are live. All right, we're gonna have a look today at on the surface of it is a very simple thing, which is Jacob Yaakov requesting to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, and it's a little bit more complicated if you have a sensitive reading of the text. So that's exactly what we're going to try and do. There are no commentaries today. It's purely a what I call a close reading of the text and trying to see whether we can decipher the clues there, and are there life lessons for us in our own lives, which might be the tensions going on here between Yaakov, Yosef, the brothers, and also within the bigger Egyptian populace, with how Yosef asks to bury his father in Eretz Canaan as well. So we're going to have a look, and we'll just jump in with the first source. And it begins as follows: Vayikrevu Yemei Yisrael Lamut. And the days of Israel's death were coming close. It's an interesting way of doing it. He was coming to the end of his life. Vayikra, and he called Libno Yosef, to his son, to Joseph. Vayomer lo, and he said to him, Imna matzati chen be'enecha. If now I have found favor in your eyes, simna yadecha tachat yerechi, please place your hand under my thigh. Va'asita imadi chesed v'emet, and please do for me a kindness and a truth. Al na takbireni b'Mitzrayim. Al na tikbireni b'Mitzrayim. Please do not bury me in Egypt. Lamed v'shachavti im avotai. Rather, I will lie with my forefathers. Unsatani mitzrayim. You shall carry me from Egypt. Ukvartani b'gvuratam, and you shall bury me with their in their burial. Vayomar anochi esekid barecha, and Yosef answers, I will do as you have said. And then Lamed Aleph says, Vayomer hishav ali, and Yisrael, or Jacob, says back to him, swear to me. Vayishav alo, and Joseph swore to his father. Vayishtachu Yisrael al rosh hamita. And then Yisrael bowed at the top of the bed. It's a fascinating thing going on here, that he makes a request: bury me in Canaan, bury me where my forefathers have been buried, in presumably Ma'arat Machpelah, which will be spelled out a little later. Don't bury me in Egypt, okay? Just don't do it. Yosef agrees, and then his father Israel asks him to take an oath that he will indeed do so. So it begs the question, why is Yaakov asking him to take an oath if he's already agreed to do so? What is the concern that is so bothering Yaakov that he demands of his son to take a shivuah, to take an oath? What do we think?
He wanted absolute certainty.
Okay, so it could be something as simple as that Lisa's saying, that he needs certainty. He needs to know for sure. And that oath will guarantee for him that Yosef will fulfill his last request. Fair. I think that's a very much a pshat answer to what's going on. Anything else going on in Yaakov's mind that would require him to make Yosef take an oath?
Well, I was just thinking that it seems as if he really is placing so much importance on the land, and and connecting the land with ancestors. That and the importance of it in terms of an eternal resting place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is something in the words here of Yaakov or Yisrael's request, which is bound up in the centrality of eternity of the land of Israel with one's spirituality. I may have lived the last 17 years in Egypt, but my destiny, my spiritual destiny lies in Israel and Eretz Canaan, and therefore the oath, you would say, is again firming up that the importance of that, or secondary.
It almost, to me, I don't know about the rest of you, but to
Yeah,
me,
it makes a lot of sense.
there's a sense of
Yeah.
when someone knows they're dying, there's a sense of immediacy to it, and
Yeah.
urgency
Mhm.
to put their business together.
Absolutely. Again,
Yeah.
I see it a lot in my professional life that people, when they're passing away, they have certain things that they want to
Make sure.
are resolved.
I'm approaching that
And
age.
some of that is Jewish burial, and some of that is having conversations which maybe had been put off, those last wishes or those last conversations which are so critical, which are so important. Hey, Marilyn, you were going to share.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
I think we sort of.
Sure.
My mother had a cousin who was born in Jerusalem,
Mm-hmm.
and he did all his. He was a psychiatrist. He did all his work in United States, and yet, in his wishes, when he passed away, he wanted to be buried in Peru, where he was born, not Jerusalem. To me, that was so strange, because I was born in Peru, but I would love to be buried in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, so it's what your heart feels.
Your heart
attached
feels,
to.
yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I want to go into just a few verses later, in source number 2. Yaakov brings back up this conversation with Yosef in source 2, and it says, "Va'ani." He wants to tell him that he wants to tell he wants to remind Yosef of something that he knows is on Yosef's mind, which is, what is Yaakov asking of Yosef? Bury me
With my ancestors. Not
Bury
with,
me with my
not with
ancestors,
your mother.
not with your mother. And guess what? Not only that, and I didn't do it for your mother. Va'ani bevo'imi Padan. When I was coming from Padan Aram, from Lavan's house, Meta alai Rachel, my wife Rachel died on me suddenly. Be'eretz Canaan, we were already in the land of Canaan, but Derech on the way. But od kivrat Eretz nabo Efrat, we were on our way to Efrat. Ve'ekbareh Hasham b'derech Efrat he Beit Lachem, and I buried her there on the way to Efrat, which is called Bethlehem or Bethlehem. Yaakov is saying to Yosef, what I'm asking for you, I didn't do for your mother. Your mother died in childbirth. It was unexpected. It was tragic. And I was not able, even though the journey was much closer. There were circumstances which stopped me. And again, without getting too much into commentaries, there are commentaries that suggest that there were other issues at play here, that there was a reason why Rachel had to be buried where she was buried and not in the cave of Machpelah with the other Avot and Imahot. But here, what he's saying is, on the straight shot understanding, he's saying, I didn't do this for your mom. I'm not going to be buried. And not only did I not do it for her, as Marilyn says, I don't want to be buried with her. Rather, I want to be buried with Abraham and Yitzchak, with Sarah and Rivka and with Leah. I want to be buried there. I don't want to be buried somewhere else. And I'm asking you to do something which I didn't do for your own mother, which is, I know I didn't do this. I know what I'm asking for you is bringing up an old wound, which is, I'm asking you to do something for me which I couldn't do for your mom. And I know the family tensions, and I know the difficulties. And yet I'm still asking that of you, which is, Yaakov right now, in these chapters 47 and 48, and then 49, he's really finally getting to the end of some of the family strife, which is, I'm going to put my cards on the table. And some of the things which I have done, you may not have understood, and you certainly did not agree with. And yet, I'm asking you to do this for me. So we have here source number one. We're talking about the primacy of the land of Israel, the spirituality of being buried there. We have this strange notion of him asking to swear after Yosef has already agreed, which we again on the pshat level is simply this is what he's concerned about, and he just wants to make sure it happens. And then we have this, and by the way, I know I didn't do this for your mom, but I know that hurt you, and I still need you to do this for me. And by the way, I may be hurting you even more now, because why shouldn't I be buried with your mom? And I'm choosing to be buried here. And yet, I'm still putting all that out there. In source number 3, this is where after Yaakov has blessed all of his sons and given them all berachot, or given them some musar, given them some rebuke, he now tells them what to do. Vaitzav otam, and he commanded them. Vayomar, and he said to them, Ani ne'esaf el ami, I shall be gathered unto my people. Kivru oti el avotai, bury me to my fathers. Where? El ha'me'ara, asher b'steh Ephron hachiti, to the cave which is in the field of Ephron the Hittite. Ba'me'ara asher b'steh ha'machpelah, and we're going to be very specific. In the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, asher al panei Mamre, be'eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan, which Kana Avraham et Hasadeh, that Avraham acquired as a field, me'et Ephron ha'chiti lachuzat kaveh, that he acquired it from Ephron the Hittite as an eternal burial plot. Shama kavut Avraham, there is buried Avraham, vet Sarai Ishto, and Sarai his wife. Shama kavut Yitzchak, vet Rivka Ishto, there is buried Yitzchak and Rivka his wife. V'shama kavarti et Leah, and there I buried Leah. Now you can just imagine the knife, not the pain there for Yosef in front of his brothers. There I buried my wife Leah. It's not where Rachel is buried. Mikneh hasadeh v'hame'ara asher bo me'et b'nei chet. The field was acquired, and the cave, again, it's very legalese terminology. And then Lamed Gimel, Vaychal Yaakov letzavot et banav, Yaakov concluded commanding his children, Vaye'esof raglav al hamita, Vaygva vaye'asef el amav. Okay, he drew his feet into the bed, whatever that euphemism means, and breathing his last, he was gathered to his people. Okay, so the last words of Yaakov are not children take an oath and bury me in Mitzrayim, but bury me in Canaan, in Marat Machpelah, but you're just going to do this. There is no requirement for the other sons to take an oath. Why is that? Perhaps because they have no power to make it happen. Which is, who can make this happen? Yosef. Yosef is the viceroy of Egypt. He is the most powerful person in the known world. He can make this happen. He can make this request happen, but you cannot. So I'm going to command you to do it, but I'm not going to make you take an oath. And again, and then all this legalese terminology, this is part of the Torah's constant message to let us know that there are certain parts, the whole of biblical Israel is ours, but specifically the areas which have the most tension today are the ones which were not just spiritually given to us by God, but were paid for hand over fist by our ancestors. So you think about it, the places which were paid for, they are the ones which we have the biggest bone of contention with our cousins. In source 4, we now have an interesting and strange presentation of what's going on by Yosef to Paro. And we should be concerned when we read these verses, and certainly source number 5. There's something at play here which, if we're not careful, we miss it. Which just seems to be, there's an old man whose dying wishes to be buried in Canaan. He is not an Egyptian, just bury me where I grew up. That's all it is. And we could move on and say, finito. But when you read 4 and 5, we're going to see something very powerful, which is, wow, this hits us in the face today in 2023. It says as follows, Vaya'avru yemei vechito, and the days of crying, literally, were over. Vaydaber Yosef el beit Paro lemor, and Yosef spoke to the house of Pharaoh, saying, Imna matzati chen be'enechem, if now I have found favor in your eyes, dabru na be'oznei Paro lemor, please speak on my behalf to Pharaoh, saying, Ani hishbi'ani lemor, my father made me swear, saying, that's true, Hine anochi met, behold, I am about to die. B'kivri asher kariti li be'eretz Canaan, shama tikbereni. Bury me in the place, in the grave which I made ready when I was in the land of Canaan. Shama tikbereni, there you shall bury me. Ve'ata elena ve'ekbera et avi ve'ashuva. Now let me go up and bury my father, and then I shall return. Vayome Paro, and Paro said, Ale ukvor et avicha kasher ishbiecha. Bury your father like the oath that you took, according to the promise you made. Again, if we read it quickly, there's nothing going on here. Here's the sensitivity, which I want you to be careful of. Yosef is not asking Paro directly. He's asking for members of the court to intercede on his behalf. Why? Not only that, he does not say, I need to bury my father in our ancestral plot, in our spiritual home in the land of Israel. This is like someone saying, no, I'm not going to be buried in the Sephardic Brotherhood. I've got a burial plot in New York or in Chicago. That's what's happening here. He doesn't say, you know what, the most important place to my father was the land of Canaan. He's not saying that. He's saying, we already made burial arrangements.
Very diplomatic.
It's very diplomatic. What's he hiding? What does he not want to tell Paro? What's he concerned of being accused of? Dual loyalty.
Yes, disloyalty.
I
really like Egypt. I'm coming back.
Right. I love Egypt. I'm coming back. But it's not my father's place. Instead, he said, you know what? My dad made plans before he came down here. He'd like to be buried there. Like you said, he grew up in Lima, Peru, so he wants to be buried there. Nothing to do with anything too deep. He just grew up there. He'd like to be buried there. Why is he the most powerful person in the world? Why is he not talking to Paro himself? The sensitivity here is, and Yosef has to say this, let me go up and bury my father. He could have left it there, and I will come back. What's the concern? Yosef won't come back. Yosef, who saved the entire Egyptian economy, the entire Egyptian empire, and probably made it the empire, is almost now a prisoner. He's so powerful, he's so important. He's the most important person in Egypt. He cannot be afforded the risk, the concern that he may leave.
Can't be a defector.
Mm-hmm.
What?
He can't defect to the
Like
West.
the spies, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't be a defector. You have too much knowledge. You're too important. You're a public figure.
Have a look now at source number 5, and you'll see how it's all going to come together. Look at this. It says, Vaya'al Yosef likbor et aviv. And Yosef went up to bury his father. Let's listen. Vaya'alu ito kol avdei Pharaoh ziknei beito. And then who went up with him? All of the servants of Pharaoh, ziknei beito, the elders of his household, v'chol ziknei Eretz Mitzrayim, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. So you could say, come on, Rabbi, they're just showing kavod, it's an honor, all the honorable members. Now carry on. V'chol beit Yosef, ve'echav u'beit aviv. This sounds good. The whole house of Joseph, and his brothers, and all his father's house. And now listen. Rak tapam v'tzonam uvkaram azvu be'eretz Goshen. Just the children and the cattle, the flocks, they had to remain in the land of Goshen. And if it wasn't enough for you, Vaya'alima, who else went up with him? Gam rechev gam perashim, the army went up with him. The horses, the chariots. It was a great and a heavy group who went up with him. It's exactly what you said, Marilyn. They're worried that what? The whole family of Yaakov is going to try to do what? Defect. Okay, we've helped you out through the famine. Now it's time to go home. And what is Paro saying to Yosef? Do exactly what your father asked you. You'll bury your father in Canaan, and you'll come right back. And how do we know you're going to come right back? Because your family's waiting for you. The children are all there. The flocks, forget the flocks. You take those words out, but your children are there. Your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. You got to come back. And if you want to leave them and abandon them, my soldiers are right there to make sure there's nothing you can do. It was interesting that in the Soccer World Cup, the Iranian soccer players didn't want to sing the national anthem. And then they threatened their wives and their children who were not allowed to go with them to the game. Why? Because they're worried they're going to defect. We see this all the time, that what was Yaakov saying here? I'm asking you to do the most dangerous thing imaginable, which is be a proud Jew. Play that card where you're going to say, I'm Jewish, and guess what? There are some things which are better in Israel than they are in Egypt. There are some things which are better in Israel than they are in America. Can I say that? Can we say those things out loud? Can we say that? I'm also asking you to do something which I didn't do for your mother. I'm asking you to be buried away from your mother in Marat HaMachpelah, which is the most important place to me. And I want you to put your life on the line. Okay? You might have thought, great, Yosef can do this. He can retire from political life and go and take care of his father and bury him. Maybe it's time for the whole family to get up and go. No, no, no. You can go and bury your father, but everyone else is staying. And how much more do we know this? When Yosef dies, what happens? Yosef says, please take my bones with you when you leave. Another generation later, you can't even go to bury. There's a whole thing going on. Even the wagons, which, you remember when Yosef goes, Yosef doesn't go. Who brings Yaakov down? Yosef's not allowed to leave. This is the only time that Yosef is allowed to leave in the entire time that he is the number one, the prime minister, the whatever you want to say.
Viceroy, I guess.
The viceroy, yeah. This is the
Viceroy.
only time that he leaves the land from the time that he is 17 until he's 110. He only leaves one time. And the only time he gets out is he's already dead. And his bones are buried. And where is he buried? In Kever Yosef, in Shechem, which is one of the most hotly contested places in Israel. But I just want you to understand here, Yaakov's request, I'm an old man, I have a dying wish, please bury me in Israel, is not what was going on here. Yaakov is saying, I know what this is going to do. Yaakov had nevuah. Yaakov also had not only just prophecy, he had a Masorah, a tradition that we were going down to exile in Egypt. And that exile can be beautiful and comfortable and wonderful. And that's what it was, those first years in Egypt. Those 17 years were glorious. And they lived on the fat of the land and were given everything. But now things to begin to change, which is Yosef is an important person, but he saved Egypt. He's not saving Egypt anymore. And so therefore we will have short-term memories. And so therefore, or on the other hand, they value him so much, they're going to treat him like a prisoner. He's this great scientist. He's this great whatever. We're not going to let him out of our clutches. So this is an interesting thing. We read Vayhi virtually every time is the week of the fast of the 10th of Tevet. I mentioned this in the WhatsApp group, which is, this is a fast where, yes, historically it's the beginning of the siege of Jerusalem, which would lead to the destruction of the temple. But it's also a fast day where we commemorate the fact that we are at the mercy of others, that we are struggling in the diaspora. I actually don't think it should be, that people discuss whether it should be a fast in the modern state of Israel. Do you still keep the fast days if we're already living there? But in the diaspora, it's very apropos because we are at the whims, which is, maybe they'll translate our texts into other languages. Maybe they will see the good that we can offer them. But maybe, just like Yosef, they do value us as prisoners. And where do we see that? Where do we see this battle of assimilation, this battle of anti-Semitism, of persecution? And where do we see it as? It's a warm, loving embrace. And then that warm, loving embrace becomes so tight you can't escape. And this has happened throughout history. It happened in Egypt, of course, but it's happened in every single place that we've lived, where we have been first loved, if not loved, valued and appreciated, to controlled, and then mistreated, to being persecuted. It's a hard one because the lessons are, I can well see the patterns of history. Can I see the patterns of the current day? Do I see things changing where we live? Is this current wave of upward trend of anti-Semitism that we're facing a passing wave of anti-Semitism? Or are we living the constant historical patterns, which are everyone's happy, everyone's successful, everyone's thriving, and things begin to change. And I don't know. I don't always want to be the naysayer saying it's time to go, it's time to leave. Because I think things do change, and I think that things are more nuanced than good or bad or time to stay, time to leave. I think that it's a challenge. But looking at these psukim, Yaakov is talking to Yosef, but he's talking to us. And Yosef is talking to us. He's not just talking to the house of Pharaoh. Please, can you get me out? Can we do this? How are we going to do this? What's going to be? What are our things? What are our options here? But I could just imagine here, what are they bewailing here? Are they bewailing the death of Yaakov? Or are they bewailing the beginning of the exile and the harsh exile in Egypt? That could also be the lament, which is that Yosef and all that generation, all the brothers, they're all buried in Mitzrayim. And at that point, yes, they didn't have freedom to leave Egypt, but slavery didn't begin till everyone had passed away. It's only next week when we start Shemot, where it gets even more dark and oblique. And I think, again, I don't, this time of year where we have such little light and it's dark most of the time and it's gloomy and rainy and gray, but our rabbis have a reason why the calendar is the way that it is and the Torah readings happen when they happen. And we have to be careful, we have to be sensitive to this and realize where we're at. So Marilyn, you look very thoughtful. I was just wondering what you want to share.
I
know.
agree. No, definitely. I'm always amazed in terms of the wisdom of the rabbis of the way things
Timing, yeah.
Absolutely.
I just think every time we finish with Hanukkah and they're like, "Hey, we won," and it's like, you never win. There's always consequences. Like we beat the Greeks. But then our Torah is translated into Greek, and then it can be used against us. Or, on a positive flip, we're so dependent on Greek. Like most of us, myself included, I'm more comfortable in English than I am in Hebrew. Thank God I'm able to translate, I'm able to read through Hebrew texts, but there are some texts which are opaque to me. Why is it that we're stuck? We are children of.
Wherever you
Yeah.
It's okay, they're opaque to modern Israelis too. Don't feel
Biblical Hebrew is hard, but I'm saying it's a challenge though that we need to face on, which is there are always pros and cons to every situation, and there is no yay, we won. We lost in many ways. And we won in others. And just to think about that Yaakov's request is a clarion call on Asara B'Tevet, on the 10th of Tevet, to think about where are we in history, and are we comfortable where we are?
We have to end on a happy note.
I closed it on